The diner buzzed with the steady rhythm of clinking dishes, the hiss of the coffee machine, and the low hum of conversation. For Sarah, it was a familiar symphony, one that had become background noise in the life she barely managed to hold together. Her feet ached from hours on them, her shoulders stiff from constant motion, but she moved with practiced efficiency, delivering plates and refilling drinks with a smile that had become her armor. It wasn't a warm, effortless smile, it was a survival smile. One she wore because she had to, not because she felt it. Every shift ended with a mixture of relief and dread, relief that the work was done, dread that tomorrow would demand the same. Table 17 was the last one on her route. The man sitting there caught her eye the moment she entered the room. There was something about him that made her stomach tighten, not fear, exactly, but a strange combination of curiosity and caution. He didn't look like someone who belonged in a diner, even a high-end one like this. He looked like he belonged on a yacht, in a boardroom, or on the cover of a business magazine. His suit was impeccable, tailored to perfection, the color a deep, confident navy. His hair, flecked with silver, was combed neatly back, revealing a face that was both striking and impossible to read. He looked like a man who had everything and needed nothing, yet he was here, taking up a corner booth as if it were just another temporary stage. Sarah approached with her usual greeting. "Good afternoon, sir. Can I get you anything else before you go?" Her voice was steady, though a small tremor in her chest betrayed her curiosity. She had been watching him for a few minutes, noting the careful way he arranged his silverware, the precision with which he sipped his water, the way he glanced at the menu but didn't seem interested in ordering anything more. There was a calmness about him, a kind of measured patience that made her own rushed, chaotic world feel even more jagged. "Yes, everything is fine," he said. The voice was smooth, rich with quiet authority. He looked directly at her as he spoke, and she felt like he could see past the mask she wore every day, past the waitress apron and the tired lines under her eyes, straight to the person she tried so hard to protect. "Thank you." And with that, he stood, carefully folded his napkin, and walked out. No wave, no smile, no glance backward, nothing. Just the sound of the door closing behind him, leaving a small echo in the quiet diner. She stared after him for a long moment, unsure if she was angry, stunned, or both. It wasn't the first time a customer had left her without a tip, but something about him made the sting sharper. Maybe it was the calm certainty in his steps, the kind of certainty that said, "I know my worth, and I decide what others deserve." Maybe it was the contrast between his elegance and the chaos of her life, the bills stacked high on the counter at home, the fridge that groaned under the weight of what little food it contained, the rent notice she tucked under a magnet yesterday and avoided thinking about ever since. Sarah returned to the counter and stacked the plates from the table with a practiced hand, but her mind was elsewhere. Mia, her coworker and closest ally in the diner, leaned over, drying her hands on a dish towel. "Table 17. She asked softly, a knowing glance exchanged between them. Sarah nodded, folding the receipt and tucking it into her apron pocket. "0. Clean 0, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not even a single cent." Mia winced. "I think I saw him on the news. He's one of those billionaire tech guys, right? The ones who make millions while the rest of us are still figuring out how to pay rent." Her tone was half joke, half jealousy, and Sarah felt the familiar pang of envy settle in her chest. "Apparently," Sarah muttered. She turned back to the table, stacking the remaining silverware, the sound sharp in the quiet. "I don't get it, Mia. I've waited on plenty of wealthy customers. They tip. They leave $5, $10, even $20 sometimes, just for a good smile or a friendly chat. But him, nothing. 0. Mia shrugged, trying to lighten the mood. "Maybe he's testing you." Sarah blinked at her. "Testing me? What, to see if I throw the plate at him?" Her voice had a hollow laugh in it. "I've survived shifts that felt like war zones. I've served tables that treated me like furniture. But I've never had anyone leave a tip of 0 just to see what I'd do." Her fingers brushed the corner of the plate he had used, smoothing over the faint streaks of sauce he hadn't quite finished. Something about the plate called to her. Something felt off. The man hadn't even looked upset, hadn't glanced at the bill, hadn't acted as though leaving 0 was an act of cruelty. It had been deliberate, intentional, and that realization made a chill run down her spine. She bent over the table, lifting the plate to clean it properly. That's when she noticed it. Something small, almost hidden, taped to the underside. Her first thought was prank. Someone in the kitchen trying to make a joke at her expense. Her second thought was disbelief. No one left anything for her under the plate. That was ridiculous. But curiosity got the better of her. She carefully peeled back the tape, her fingers trembling just slightly. It wasn't money. It was heavier, thicker. She lifted it slowly and saw the envelope, smooth and weighty, her name written on it in neat, deliberate handwriting. Sarah, it said, plain and unassuming. She blinked at it. Her heart began to race. Who would leave her a note here? Why here? And why now? The diner seemed to vanish around her. The noise from the other tables, the hiss of the coffee machine, the chatter, it all faded into a distant hum. She sat down slowly, the chair creaking beneath her, the envelope in her lap like something alive, vibrating with a quiet power she didn't understand yet. Her hands shook as she opened it, and inside, a folded letter and a small laminated card rested neatly. The letter's handwriting was clean, precise, almost surgical, each word hitting her like a hammer. You work hard, it began. Harder than most people notice. Her throat tightened. She read on, each sentence seeming to echo the parts of herself she kept hidden, the struggles she had carried silently for years. She realized then that this man, this stranger in a suit, had been watching her in some way. Not her actions, exactly, but her essence. Her endurance. Her dignity. I left you $0 on purpose. I needed to know who you were when there was nothing to gain. Sarah's eyes welled with tears she hadn't allowed herself to shed in years. The letter was short, but it was carefully designed to pierce through the fatigue, the worry, the endless grind of her life. Each word affirmed her worth in a way that no tip, no compliment, no polite smile ever could. Her hands trembled as she unfolded the second item, the card. Matte black, minimalist, and elegant, it bore a name she recognized immediately, Elliot Grain. Underneath, a private phone number and 3 words in smaller print, call me tomorrow. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Everything she had been struggling with, the late rent, the fading hope, the endless grind, felt suspended in a single, impossible moment. For the first time in years, a door had opened. And it had opened because of zero. Because of nothing. Sarah sat there long after the diner had quieted, the plate still in her lap, the envelope pressed to her chest. Outside, the sun began to set, casting golden light across the linoleum floor, painting the walls with warmth she hadn't felt in months. And for the first time, she allowed herself to imagine that maybe, just maybe, life could be different. Sarah didn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, the envelope on her nightstand seemed to glow, almost pulsing with the weight of its promise. She turned it over in her hands repeatedly, as if doing so might somehow reveal more than just the neatly folded letter and the black card. Every crease, every fold, felt alive, like it was waiting for her to act. The quiet hum of the city outside her window did nothing to soothe her restless mind. Instead, it reminded her that life outside these walls continued, indifferent and unrelenting. Her son, Noah, slept peacefully in the next room, one arm flung lazily across his pillow, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in his mother's thoughts. By morning, doubt had arrived like an unwelcome visitor. What if it was a prank? A test she had unknowingly failed by daring to believe it. What if calling that number made her look foolish, desperate, or naive? She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the envelope, fingers tracing the sharp edges of the card. Her heart thudded erratically, every beat echoing in her chest like a warning. Yet beneath the fear, beneath the jittery uncertainty, there was something else, a flicker of hope, fragile and almost forbidden, that refused to be ignored. She packed Noah's lunch mechanically, the ritual grounding her as much as it was monotonous. Peanut butter sandwiches, cut diagonally, a small bag of fruit snacks, a note tucked in the corner, have a great day, love you. Her hands shook slightly as she prepared it, the envelope still burning in her thoughts. Noah's bright, trusting face in the morning sunlight made her chest ache. She wanted to protect him, to give him every advantage she could, and now there was a chance, a real one, that everything could change. The walk to school was quiet. Noah skipped ahead a few steps, turning to grin at her over his shoulder. Mom, are you okay? He asked. There was a subtle concern in his voice, one that only a child could express so plainly. Sarah forced a smile. I'm fine, baby. Just thinking about some things. She held his small hand a little tighter than usual, as if gripping onto the courage she needed to take the next step. Back at her apartment, she sat at the small kitchen table, the envelope finally opened and laid before her. The card felt heavier than it should have, more significant than any business card she had ever held. She took a deep breath, her finger hovering over the numbers printed neatly on the card. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Every tick of the clock made the decision more urgent. Finally, she picked up her phone, the screen cold against her palm. She dialed the number, holding her breath. It rang once. Twice. Her heart raced so fast she thought it might burst. Then a voice, calm, steady, deliberate, answered. Sarah, it said. The single word carried authority, recognition, and a kind of expectation that made her swallow hard. I was hoping you'd call. Her hands shook, and she could barely find her voice. You know my name. I do, Elliot Grain said, calm as ever. Do you have 10 minutes? Yes, she replied, though she wasn't sure she truly did. 10 minutes was nothing, yet it was everything. It was the thin line between disbelief and opportunity, between remaining in the life she knew and stepping into something completely unknown. Good. I want to offer you a job, he said. The words felt surreal, echoing in her mind long after she had hung up. A job. Her mind raced. She was a waitress. She had no corporate experience. She had never navigated a boardroom, never strategized business plans. She knew spreadsheets as a concept, not as tools for decision making. The words felt too big, too sudden, too impossible. Yet something in his voice made her believe him. Something in the way he had watched her, the way he had left that envelope, told her he had seen more than her uniform and the apron. He had seen the resilience that came from long hours and relentless responsibility, the judgment that could not be bought or faked. He didn't need credentials. He needed insight, honesty, truth. He explained over the call that his company was launching a foundation aimed at supporting working parents, real support, not empty promises. And he needed someone who understood the stakes, who had lived the difficult choices, who could tell the stories that mattered. Someone who knew what it meant to weigh time against money, presence against survival. I could hire 100 consultants, he said. They'd give me charts, statistics, projections. You'd give me truth. Sarah leaned back in her chair, her mind reeling. She felt dizzy, disoriented, yet exhilarated. The thought of stepping into a world she had never imagined filled her with both terror and thrill. She remembered the late nights waiting tables, the unpaid bills, the constant worry about how to keep her small household afloat. She remembered Noah's shoes, worn thin, the way he tried to hide the holes in them from her. And suddenly, it was like a veil lifted. This wasn't a fantasy. It was real. The next day, she arrived at the office building, a sleek tower of glass and steel that seemed almost impossible against the city skyline. She wore a borrowed blazer, her favorite notebook clutched tightly in her hands, fingers white from gripping it so tightly. Her palms sweated as she stepped into the elevator, the mirrored walls reflecting the anxious, hopeful expression on her face. Every floor that passed made her heart pound faster. This was unfamiliar territory, and yet every step felt strangely like it belonged to her, like she had been walking toward this moment all her life without realizing it. Elliot greeted her personally, his presence calm but commanding. He didn't smile, not in the conventional sense. But there was a subtle acknowledgement in his eyes, a recognition that she had arrived, that she had accepted the challenge he had laid before her. The office itself was a whirlwind of motion, assistants moving quickly, screens flashing with numbers and projections, yet he led her to a quiet conference room, glass walls overlooking the city below. For hours, Sarah spoke. She told stories, about parents who skipped meals so their children could eat, about jobs that punished honesty, about the courage it took to keep showing up when the world seemed indifferent. She spoke not as a professional, but as someone who had lived every sentence. Her words were raw, unpolished, authentic. She could see him listening, absorbing, noting, but never interrupting. It was the first time in her life someone had truly heard her without judgment. By the end of the day, something had shifted. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a voice, a perspective, a story that mattered. The work was daunting, yes, but it was meaningful. She could see the impact she could have, not just for herself, but for countless other working parents whose struggles were often invisible. Weeks passed, and Sarah settled into her new role. She no longer worried about rent notices or unpaid bills. She could pick Noah up from school before sunset, cook him dinner, and actually sleep at night without the constant weight of fear pressing down on her chest. The city felt different now, not harsher, not unkind, but alive, full of possibilities she had never allowed herself to imagine. One afternoon, Elliot stopped by her office. She was typing up notes from a meeting when he placed something carefully on her desk. She looked down to see a familiar receipt. $0. You know, she said, a small, genuine smile spreading across her face. Most people would call that cruel. He nodded, the corner of his mouth lifting in the faintest trace of a smile. Most people never look under the plate, he said. Sarah glanced out the window at the city, sunlight reflecting off the glass towers, a soft breeze stirring the papers on her desk. Life had changed, transformed not by a tip, not by luck, but by the act of seeing her, truly seeing her, in a moment when nothing else seemed to matter. And in that moment, Sarah realized something profound. Beginnings could come from endings, hope could come from zero, and sometimes, life changed in the quietest, most unexpected ways. All it took was someone noticing, truly noticing, what was there all along.